Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is the next up in my Agatha Christie read-through series. I've read 3 books recently that I want to talk about. They are all Poirot, and they are all Poirot on holiday. So that is my theme for this particular video, Poirot on holiday. So for this video I have for you Death on the Nile, Appointment with Death, and A Holiday for Murder. So I'm going to go in chronological order here since I am reading through Agatha Christie in the order in which she published her books. And so I am going to start with Death on the Nile. This is a book from 1937. And I did this as a buddy read with Lori from Girl Who Books Built, and that was really fun. We chatted while we were reading on Goodreads, and then we had a video call at the end to talk about the book and what we thought, and that was really fun. I'm going to include her channel information in the description box below. Death on the Nile takes place in Egypt, and Poirot is on holiday. Death on the Nile is a closed circle mystery because the bulk of it takes place on a steamer boat that's going down the Nile, and so the people on the boat are as far as who are potential suspects who could have done it. And so I love a good closed circle mystery, and I quite enjoy them when they're while traveling, which is what's happening in this book. This is a third person. It's told in the third person. There is no narrator. Hastings is not part of this story. And I loved it. As far as a ranking, it's currently sitting number 2 on my list of Agatha Christie books that I've read so far. It was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. And I want to get into some stuff, and I don't want to worry about spoiling. So I am going to put spoiler on the bottom of the screen for the rest of this discussion, and that will allow me to just talk about whatever I want to talk about. And so if you have not read this yet and you don't want anything spoiled, then fast forward until you can't see spoiler on the bottom of the screen anymore. So let's just dive into this. The main characters in this are Lynette Ridgway. She is a very, very wealthy young woman. A good friend of hers, Jackie de Belfort, and Jackie's fiance, Simon Doyle. Those are the main characters in this story. Now, the beginning of the book, we meet Lynette, and in classic Agatha Christie form, she takes a few chapters to introduce you to all the characters who will end up on the boat together in the second part of this book. And I quite enjoy that. She gives you little snippets, and in really, really brief paragraphs, you know who these characters are and what some of their motivations are as well. I liked how Lynette's engagement / marriage to Simon Doyle happens off stage. It's a key event in the story, but it all happens off stage. We find out that she's engaged to Simon in a discussion between Tim Allerton and his mother, and then we find out that the wedding and the honeymoon plans from a discussion between Pennington and Rockford, who are her American lawyers. So yeah, I really like that. And then Simon and Lynette, they meet at the end of chapter 3 for the very first time, and then we don't see them again until about 20 pages later in part 2 in Egypt, and they are already married and they're on their honeymoon. So I actually really like that about how she wrote this story, that such a key point, a key factor in the story happens off stage. And so you don't see how Simon and Lynette fall in love and how Simon and Jackie break up, and we don't see any of that messiness directly on the page, but it is such an important part of the story. There was a lot in here that she wrote about life and death, which I found was interesting. On page 33 she wrote, "It's certainly not a matter of life or death, agreed Mrs. Otterburn, But there she was quite wrong, for a matter of life and death was exactly what it was. And that's the end of part 1. And then Poirot says on page 54, she is in love, heart, soul, and body, and she is not of those who love lightly and often. With her, it is clearly the life and the death. And there he's referring to Jackie de Belfort. Poirot again on page 77 says, someone is considered to be harmful to civilization and is removed on that account. Such people forget that life and death are the affair of the good God. And then finally on page 268, Jackie says, it's so dreadfully easy killing people, and you begin to feel that it doesn't matter, that it's only you that matters. It's dangerous, that. And then again on page 271, she talks again about how easy it is to kill. So this person who believed that the thing that was most important to them was an issue of life or death, found causing death in others so easy. I thought that was really interesting. Again, as far as how Poirot investigates, which is something that I've been looking at as I do this reread, they talk about truth again. Poirot says, that is what I have been seeking to do, clear away the extraneous matter so that we can see the truth, the naked, shining truth. He talks about order and method again, which is a really important part of how he investigates. And he also talks about the psychology in this book. And so order and method and psychology are really the key factors that he uses when he investigates crimes. I thought it was really interesting. I kept track of the clues, what I thought were clues, the clues that I found anyway. And I discovered Jackie and Simon both using the same simile when talking to Poirot. And that was not seeing the moon anymore when the sun comes out. I also thought this brief conversation between Poirot and Simon was a clue, but to succeed in life, every detail should be arranged well beforehand, Poirot says. Simon laughed and said, that is how the more skillful murderer behaves, I suppose. Now I thought that was very interesting because Simon is definitely part of the murderous duo in this book. But Simon is not the careful planner. That's Jackie. And so I thought that was really interesting. Poirot references the sun and the moon again later after both Jackie and Simon talk about it. He says, the sun is gone and the moon rises, referring to the death of Lynette. I also thought that this book is so tightly plotted. Agatha Christie did such a great job of only putting in here what was necessary. She only put what was necessary about the characters that you needed to know about them. The plot points are only what's necessary. So it's a really tightly plotted book, and it's also really cleverly laid out. So the book opens with Mr. Burnaby of the Three Crowns discussing Lynette, and he says, let's see. That's her, said Mr. Burnaby again, and he went on in a low, awed voice. Millions she's got. Going to spend thousands on the place. Swimming pools there's going to be, and Italian gardens, and a ballroom, and half of the house pulled down and rebuilt. She'll bring money into the town, said his friend. He was a lean, seedy-looking man. His tone was envious and grudging. Mr. Burnaby agreed. Yes, it's a great thing for Martin Underwood. A great thing it is. Mr. Burnaby was complacent about it. Wake us up all proper, he added. And then at the end of their conversation, he mutters, it seems all wrong to me, her looking like that. Money and looks, it's too much. If a girl's as rich as that, she's no right to be a good looker as well. And she is a good looker. Got everything that girl has. Doesn't seem fair. And then the book ends with a discussion between those same two men at the Three Crowns again. And Mr. Burnaby's lean friend said, well, it didn't seem fair, her having everything. And Mr. Burnaby said acutely, well, it doesn't seem to have done her much good, poor lass. But after a while they stopped talking about her and discussed instead who was going to win the Grand National. For as Mr. Ferguson was saying at that minute in Luxor, it is not the past that matters, but the future. So I thought that was a really good way to frame her story, having those two conversations between those two men in the Three Crowns. We see Colonel Race again in this book. He comes onto the boat partway through their trip, and the last time we saw Colonel Race was in Cards on the Table, so that's another good connection on our in our Agatha Christie universe. We also have Miss Van Schuler, who says that she's heard of Poirot from her old friend Rufus Van Eyden, who was in The Mystery of the Blue Train from 1928. Poirot tells Race of a murder he investigated on the Orient Express, where someone had the impertinence to hide a kimono in his own locked suitcase, so that was very funny. And Poirot also, he mentions Hastings in this book, and he also mentions Jap. So I like to note whenever there's those, rememberings of past cases or characters that come into play. I loved Death on the Nile. I thought it was a fantastic mystery, really well plotted, very, very clever, and it's definitely one of my favorites, and I have a feeling it's going to stay in the top 5. It's currently sitting at number 2, and we'll see if it stays there, but I think that for sure it's going to stay in the top 5. And then I read Appointment with Death, which is a reread for me, and one of my favorites that I have read before. This is from 1937, and this is Poirot is on holiday in Jerusalem, and then they move to Petra, which is in, I should have looked that up. Anyways, and the first sentence of the book is fantastic. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed. It's great. So the book opens with Poirot overhearing this conversation where someone says that she's got to be killed. This book has one of the best Christie villains ever. Mrs. Boynton is on holiday in Jerusalem with her family. They are from America. She is the stepmother of 3 children and the daughter. She's got one daughter on her own. So her children, they're all grown up, are on holiday with her in Jerusalem. And as we read, we discover that she has such a psychological hold on her stepchildren that it is unbelievable. They do anything that she says. They are absolutely afraid to do their own thing if it's going to displease her. She is such a good villain. She never physically hurts these children, but psychologically and mentally, she has been torturing them for years. And so I saw that there was a lot in here about her as the center of the group. And the center of the group, heavens, thought Dr. Gerard, was with a Frenchman's candid repulsion. What a horror of a woman, old, swollen, bloated, sitting there immovable, a distorted old Buddha, a gross spider in the center of a web. And then Raymond, it has said, his eyes went to the center of his family group. And that, of course, was referencing Mrs. Boynton. We also have Sarah King, who is a young psychologist, and Dr. Gerard, who is also a psychologist from France. There was, throughout the book, references to freedom and prison in relation to these kids, and also power and control, and the importance of power and control. And I thought that it was interesting. There was so much about freedom and prison and power and control until the murder, and then it became references to freedom and escape, which I thought was really interesting. So, for example, Mrs. Boynton might be old, infirm, a prey to disease, but she was not powerless. She was a woman who knew the meaning of power, who had exercised a lifetime of power, and who had never once doubted her own force. And then as far as the Poirot universe goes in this story, he has a letter of introduction to Colonel Carberry from Colonel Race, who doesn't appear in the story, but just that letter of introduction. And then Nadine mentions Poirot's decision to accept the official verdict in the Orient Express, which I thought was interesting. And Miss Pierce read all about the ABC case. So like I said, I enjoy when I can find connections to previous books. I also started to pick up on how much Agatha Christie likes to include Shakespeare references or quotes in her books. And in this one, there was 4. There was talk about Ophelia from Hamlet in here. So I thought that was interesting. Also, Poirot gives himself sort of this deadline of solving the crime in 24 hours. And he does it without visiting the scene, which is Petra, only talking to the people concerned. And so I thought that was great. It really showed how good he is of an investigator and the type of investigation he prefers. So he's not a forensic investigator. It wasn't that important for him to see the scene or the body and to get clues that way. What was important to him was to talk to the suspects and find out the truth from those conversations. This one also had a great drawing room conclusion at the end, the great reveal. He brings together all the suspects and reveals the truth. Although what was so interesting in this one is that the killer was not actually part of that group. She was in a room next door where she could overhear what was happening. And it made me wonder if Poirot set that up on purpose, that he knew that if she heard what was happening, she may take the opportunity to kill herself, which is what she did. And so that's happened before, and I find that interesting that Poirot, in his sense of justice, that's acceptable to someone being arrested and put on trial. So I thought that was interesting. I really enjoy in Appointment with Death. I think what I liked about it is the family dynamics, and to watch the psychological hold that Mrs. Boynton has on these kids and how they react pre and post murder. And this is again in my top 5. It's currently sitting at number 3 on my list, and so we will see. I have a feeling it'll stay in the top 5 because I really do enjoy this one a lot. And then I read A Holiday for Murder from 1939, and this one worked out great for me to be able to read it in December, because in this one Poirot is on holiday, but he's in England and he is visiting a friend for Christmas. And so it still counts as a holiday. All 3 of these turned out to be Poirot on holiday, and yet still getting himself caught up in murder. So in this one, the main character is Simeon Lee, and he brings his family all to the family home for Christmas. And this is a family that's been divided. There's been a son who was away, who hasn't been home in like 20 years. And there's a lot of resentment, and there is a lot of memories. There is a lot in this book about the past and the present, about memories and false perceptions and revenge. But I enjoyed it. It's a good country house party mystery, a locked room mystery. And the dedication cracked me up. She writes, "My dear James, you have always been one of the most faithful and kindly of my readers, and I was therefore seriously perturbed when I received from you a word of criticism. You complained that my murders were getting too refined, anemic in fact. You yearned for a good violent murder with lots of blood, a murder where there was no doubt about its being murder. So this is your special story, written for you. I hope it may please your affectionate sister-in-law, Agatha." So I thought that was great that she wrote this story for him, and I wonder if it was like just a little twist of the knife that she said it at Christmas. her nice bloody murder is set at Christmas. So the Simeon family, or Simeon's children, the Lee family, come home for the Christmas holidays to Gorston Hall. It's also told in the third person, and there are 7 Shakespeare references in this one. So that's something that I've just noticed, but I'm totally going to be keeping my eye on as we continue. As far as the Agatha Christie universe goes, 3-act tragedy is mentioned twice in here, that case. And so I am going to now potentially get spoilery, so I'm going to put spoiler across the bottom so that you are not, that you don't find things out if you haven't read this yet. I highly recommend it. It was very, very enjoyable. A really good country house, closed circle, locked room mystery. I love the conversation that Poirot has with his friend Colonel Johnson on why Christmas is the time for murder. Colonel Johnson is saying, you know, that he doesn't think that it is, and Poirot gives his reasons why he totally thinks Christmas is the time for murder. Because with all the eating, there's indigestion, and with indigestion comes the irritability. He talks about families together brings strain on everybody, the hypocrisy that comes out, and sooner or later the dam bursts and a cataclysm occurs. I picked up on some clues in this one, and so I thought it was really interesting because so much in here was about family and inheritance and all of that. And so Colonel Johnson says on page 49, "Superintendent Sugden is a good man, none better, painstaking, careful, thoroughly sound, but, well, he's not an imaginative chap in any way." So I thought that was such an interesting description because, of course, Sugden turns out to be the murderer, and it turns out that he actually is very imaginative because how he pulls off this crime was really imaginative. But Colonel Johnson was correct in that he is painstaking, careful, and thoroughly sound. All of those things were true in how he planned this murder, even though Colonel Johnson was referring to it as how he is as a police officer, as a detective. The other big clue, of course, comes when we find the description of Sugden includes that he has an aquiline nose, and the description of Simeon Lee, the nose, aquiline and proud. And that's a big clue right there because it turns out that Sugden is a child of Simeon Lee that Simeon Lee never really knew about. The other family members certainly didn't know about him either. Poirot says on page 74, "The character of the victim has always something to do with his or her murder." So I thought that was interesting because we learn a lot about the character of Simeon Lee in this book, that he is a proud man, that he remembers, that he is about revenge, and all of those things play a role in his own death. Here was another clue that I picked up on. "I think that when he, Simeon, was a young man, he must have been handsome, very handsome, like you," said Pilar to Superintendent Sugden. Big clue. And something that came up in this book that has come up before is Poirot's concern for the innocent suspects if the truth were not made known in a murder. So that's come up multiple times, that one of the reasons why it's so important for Poirot to solve a crime is so that the innocent people are no longer suspect. Because you always have a group of suspects, there's a number of people who had the motive or the opportunity, and until the truth is known, all of those people, whether innocent or guilty, are under suspicion. And that bothers Poirot a lot. He does the classic gathering of the suspects at the end of this as well, where he gives a case against every person. So everyone in the house, and this is why it's a good closed circle, everyone there had a motive and he had the opportunity and had the means to commit the crime. So I thought it was interesting because I was reading this. It is a reread for me, although it was years ago. So if I was thinking as I was reading, if I remember correctly, I know who the killer is. So I was watching for clues throughout. And so I thought it was interesting that I caught the nose clue right away, the aquiline nose. But I totally missed the connection with the laughter and the stroking of the jaw. So Agatha Christie is genius at how she layers her clues into the story. They are so subtle that you very often miss them, even when you're looking for them. So those are the 3 Agatha Christies that I have read most recently in my Agatha Christie read-through. We've got A Holiday for Murder, also known as Murder for Christmas. We have Appointment with Death and Death on the Nile. These were all 5-star reads for me. They are all currently in my top 10 in my ranking of Agatha Christie's. And I am very much looking forward to continuing my Agatha Christie read-through in 2021. I'm hoping to finish it then, to read all the rest of them then. And so I will be back soon, hopefully, for another Agatha Christie video. And if you have read any of these 3 books, I would love to talk about them with you in the comment section down below. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.